I recently came across a famous David Ogilvy quote. If it doesn't sell, it's not creative. So the meaning of this quote should be clear. That's if an ad is not actively driving sales, then it's a failure, no matter how clever or creative this ad was. And so this got me thinking, because the exact same thing applies to finance. If it doesn't profit, it's a waste. And most agency owners, especially those that are very good on the creative side, are running businesses that can be full of this waste. They're keeping clients and services and expenses that maybe look good on paper or that they've just committed to months ago, but they don't apply this ruthless mentality to them, which they would apply to their ads. And so what you end up with is a business that is full of waste or things that are quietly draining the bottom line. And so that's why I wanted to record this quick video to kind of translate this, very famous concept from Ogilvy to the finances of an agency. So first off, no, this is not about penny pinching your way to success. It's also not about firing people or treating business just as a very cold money in, money out machine where there's no emotion and there's no connection to other humans and actual relationships, because that does add real value, even if it doesn't immediately result in profit. However, what it does mean is that you have to be ruthless even when it comes to these intangible parts of business, because there is a fine line between something still being worth it for either the reputation or the time saving it gives, or just something that you're overpaying for that shouldn't be there, or a hard decision that just has to be made. And so if you don't do this, that is when you end up in a situation where you keep working harder and harder without actually making more money or progressing. And so even if you're keeping team members who shouldn't really be there, then in the long run, you're not just hurting yourselves, but you're also hurting them. And that is where this ruthless mentality has to come in. But the only way that you're going to impact the lives of more clients and more people is if you can actually stay in business and run a business that is both rewarding for yourself and for everyone else it touches. And that's why I'm going to cover 5 principles for you to live by. The first principle here is the one of a ruthless profitability mindset. And so another nice quote from Ogilvy here is, "We sell or else." And I really like this one, and I think you should apply this to your agency's finances in the same way, where it's like, if it doesn't contribute to profit, what's it doing there? The top agencies we work with are consistently hitting 30-40% profit margins. Some are even above that, or the ones that are below that, they're very tactfully designed their agency so they optimize for their own time. But we see many agencies who are struggling at like a 10% profit margin. And, they're working harder and harder, but revenue and profits aren't really moving. And so that all starts by being ruthless when it comes to your P&L and all the expenses that you are, just letting sit there. First principle, be ruthless when it comes to your profits, in the same way that you would be ruthless at the ads. If there's an ad that's underperforming, you're not just gonna let spend go to it. That's the same mentality you need to take to your own expenses. The second principle is one of a ruthless client evaluation. Because many agencies are keeping their clients on legacy pricing for far too long. Maybe they're giving discounts, or they're just simply undercharging for the cost that they actually have to deliver this service. And so if you look at Ogilvy again, he wouldn't even keep a client that wouldn't listen to him. And so if you take that same mentality where you truly respect the value you deliver, you would not keep clients on a price that doesn't work for you. And again, the exact same thing applies here as it applies to your ads. If a campaign is underperforming, why would you keep it? You can be ruthless when cutting ad campaigns, and you should have the same approach to your clients. Because unless you have an infinite amount of capacity, then the opportunity cost of not being able to take a client who is easy to work with or pays a fair share of the cost that you have, then what is really the point of it? Then once you've taken a hard look at your clients, you need to look at principle 3, which is a ruthless evaluation of the services that you offer. And so to bring Ogilvy again into this principle, something that he said is that the most important decision is how to position your product. And as an agency, your product are the services that you offer. And now, a lot of the times we see agencies that might have a lot of different service lines. Sometimes they're not even very well defined, because they can just start by helping a client out with maybe their CRM tracking or some new sort of reporting. And what happens in reality is that your team is now tasked with delivering a lot of different things in a lot of different ways for many different clients. And now you will likely incur cost for that, either in time or maybe you have actual hard cost to deliver these services. And so if you are not pricing appropriately for these costs or these hours that you need to put in, then I can again guarantee you that your profits are suffering because of it. And if your profits suffer, then everything suffers, because you can either not grow at the rate that you should be growing, or your team is getting closer to a burnout because they have to do so many different things. So take a hard look at your service lines and make sure that everything is defined extremely well and that you are actually charging the right amount for the work that you are providing. The only extra nuance I'll say here is one high IQ move that you can have here. And that is that you offer a certain service as a loss leader so that you can bring in more clients into the system. And now this can be an extremely effective way to kind of land more clients that you can then expand with the other services that you have. But this is again a very fine line to walk, because a loss leader can very quickly spiral into an actual loss if you're not upselling the clients at a high enough rate, or if you underestimated the cost that you actually have, because now maybe all of your team's time and your resources go into providing this loss leading service. And if you're not benefiting from that on the back end, then again, what is the point? So take a close look at your service lines and make sure that all of them are in the right place. Then moving on to principle 4, and this is one of ruthless time management. This is one where many agencies trip up and actually find themselves working far too much for the benefit they are receiving. And so what I would like you to do is just take a couple minutes to calculate your hourly rate, because a harsh truth is that too many agency owners are actually just offering work at an hourly rate below 50 an hour. Whereas as the CEO, your hourly rate should be far above $100, even $300 per hour. And so to give you an example, even if you're taking out $10K a month, if you're still working 80-hour weeks, that is really only an hourly rate of $32 an hour. This is less than most of the mid-level employees in your agency. And so be very mindful of this, that you as the founder spend your time on the activities that are actually moving the needle. Because if you're working yourself to death but not growing the bottom line, then you will burn out and you will not have a very enjoyable time trying to grow the business, which again makes everyone suffer. And then we're moving on to the 5th principle. This is one of ruthless elimination. Now, this covers all of the previous principles and is the one to actually make sure that you action the points that we talked about. So what I want you to do is to pull up the bank statements of the last 3 months and literally go line by line. And for every expense, ask yourself if this one should be there. If these are little software products, make sure you're using the amount of seats that you're paying for, or that you're using them at all. If these are payment fees, take a look if there are any ways that you can maybe lower these or negotiate better rates, which is more like it's just often possible, which you'd be surprised by how often that is possible. Or even for your team members, make sure that they are covering enough revenue to justify their salary. And again, I'm not saying here that you need to try and penny pinch and push those rates down and make it an unpleasant place to work. But what I am saying is that if you have expensive people, you need to make sure that they're covering enough revenue to justify their salary. Because it's fun to be nice and generous and pay your team well. But if they're not getting enough work, then they are not going to be happy in the long run, and neither are you. So go through all your transactions, identify anything you can cut, and actually cut it. If you do that, then I'll guarantee you that in the next 3 months, you're going to find yourself in a far more profitable position, and you're going to have a far more enjoyable time running and growing your agency. And after you do that, you will find yourself in a position where you have more profit. Then the next step is to figure out what you're going to do with this profit to grow even faster. And that's why I would like you to watch another video that I recorded where I explain exactly how you can use Alex Hormozi's $100 million formula to grow your agency at a much faster rate. So in that video, I'll explain exactly kind of the main metric that Hormozi was always looking at. It's a metric that he calls his license to print money. And I explain exactly how that can be applied to an agency. So that video should be somewhere on the screen here or in the description. So watch that and thank me later. All right, I'll see you in the next one.